All right, thank you for the intro, and thank you all for coming back after lunch. Is it because you love CSS? That's right. So I'm really excited to be here today to talk about one of my favorite subjects in the world, which is making it easier to build websites, specifically by leveraging the power of the web platform. We heard a little bit from Kent this morning about this, and I'm excited to expand on that and talk about CSS and HTML, which I think are really the underdogs of web technologies. Now, if I was to ask you, what is your favorite programming language? Raise your hand if it's CSS. Not enough of you. CSS is really cool. So I wanted to, because of this problem that we have in our community, hype up CSS. And so I made a little trailer for my talk to get us all in the spirit. Enjoy.
And the masters of the universe. I am Adam,
Developer
and defender of the secrets of
my code base.
This is
My app.
my fearless friend. Fabulous secret powers were revealed to me the day I held aloft my magic
CSS.
stick and said, by the power of
The platform. My app.
became the mighty battle.
My app.
And I became He-Man, the most powerful
Developer.
in the universe.
So this can be you, my friends. I think my voiceover career needs some work. But I'm here to talk about how CSS is getting a lot more powerful and declarative. If you've been keeping up with the changes in this space, a lot has been going on. And so this is why I truly believe that the best way to level up your developer skill set right now is to take advantage of modern UI capabilities, to learn the platform, to leverage the platform, in addition to using React and the framework of your choice. So I hope that by the end of this talk, you too will share this sentiment. And there is so much to talk about. Before we get into it, why do we even care about CSS? I think that the biggest reason for me is it allows you to actually separate logic and style. So I'm not saying don't write any JavaScript. I'm saying write it where it makes sense, where you're doing DOM manipulation or user response, but separate the styling. We shouldn't have to write styles in our JavaScript. This also means that you can reduce third-party dependencies. A lot of the features I'm going to talk about, we'll get into that a bit more, which means you also reduce maintenance costs and complexity of your application, and that makes it easier to just build things, period. So build things faster, make your life easier. There's also a lot of great accessibility hooks that come with some of these features, so you don't have to worry about creating all those states and managing all of that accessibility, which can be really complex and hard to get right. So, as I mentioned, a lot is happening in this space. In this talk, in the time I have, I'm specifically going to cover a subset of features, and those are going to be scroll-driven animations, the popover API, anchor positioning, and then if we have time, we'll do a time check, and I might talk about select, aka styling dropdowns. So we'll see. But let's get right into it with interactions. And the first of those is scroll-driven animations. Who here has heard of native scroll-driven animations? All right, I see a couple of hands. Again, that looks like 10%, so hopefully this is going to blow your mind. So we now have the ability to define scroll-based timers in the web platform. And in terms of browser support, it's landed in Chromium-based browsers. It's currently available behind a flag in Firefox, and Safari has expressed positive signals for implementation. But I think this can be used as a progressive enhancement. So here's an example of what that might look like, where you might have some kind of scroll-based animation. These cards are kind of like moving up as you're scrolling through. But you can use it for a lot of different things, including progressive enhancement. Here, I just have like this block quote kind of animating in, these images animating in. You could do a lot of fun effects. This one animates both the grayscale to color and the positioning of that picture. And the way that we do this is very declarative. So take a look at this block quote as an example here. So this just animates in from the left side, and the opacity goes from 0 to 1. To do this, all we have to do is write a keyframe, like we would any other time-based animation, from and to, and then we apply the animation like we would any other CSS animation. But the difference is here where we give it an animation timeline, where in this case, the animation timeline, the scroller, is the view. Next, we can set the animation range where we say we want to go from the entry of 0 to 50%. So in this demo, it's animating over that view to the 50% point where it hits that 2 spot. So in just a couple lines of code, no third-party library is needed. We've created a scroll-driven animation natively in the browser. Another example is this, where we're simply animating scale and opacity, and it's very similar to the same thing, where we're just animating the entry to 25%. And what I think is really cool about this API, regardless of browser support, it's a great progressive enhancement. Because for browsers that are not supported, you'll get the existing experience, which in this case is just an image appearing on the screen. For browsers that are supported, as that list continues to grow, you can get this subtly improved user experience with those little animation hooks. And also be sure that you're checking for user preferences when you're applying styles like this. So if you have a user preference for reduced motion, maybe put this into a block that doesn't have that user preference. So another thing that you can do here is create this like scroll to, oh, you know what? The API might have slightly changed. So here I was demoing, but my demo broke. Cool. Thank you, demo gods. A little scroll to top button where, am I in Canary? I might be in, not Canary. Let me see if I can go into Canary real quick. Nope, I am. All right, something else happened. So here I wanted to demo animating from display none to display block. It's a cool demo. I'll share a link after, and you could check it out. It essentially creates this button. You animate not just the opacity, but also the display. And I used to use a library for this, so I'm stoked that last week my demo worked without any JavaScript. I swear it did. Some people were here and saw that demo working. You can also do cool things like overflow and scroll detection by leveraging this API. And it's this clever little hack where we can use Boolean values through CSS custom properties. So here we can set can scroll to 0 and then use an @ keyframe to actually detect the scroll and update the value of that custom property to 1 or to anything. And this is going to turn from 0 to 1 when there is scroll, because we can set this animation on the timeline and set the scroll to itself. So we can do these clever hacks where it looks like this in the end. If you have scroll, then you can style these arrows, which is super handy. Like, the way to do this with scripting is a pain. And it's also dynamic. So if I have more content here, the arrow will appear. So now I have these dynamic arrows being created with just a couple lines of CSS using these hacks. This one's called a space toggle. It's like a funky term for using custom properties in this way. When you use custom properties, you get a value and then a fallback value. So you can set another custom property to see if this thing scrolls. If this is invalid, then this line will be ignored and you'll get the fallback value. So that would be hidden for the visibility of those arrows. If it's valid, then you get visible. So all of this you can write in a couple lines of code using these cool tricks in CSS and the native web platform. No JavaScript needed. So there's other things you can do. Scrolly telling is another thing that you can do with this API. I like this one because I feel like we've all seen this effect. They usually require a lot of third-party scripts to implement. Now we're bringing this native to the platform. Also things like this is inspired by the Twitter UI. When you scroll down, the profile icon shrinks, the text moves, the background changes opacity. Things move around. This can all be done in a couple of lines of code by animating each of these elements separately by using @keyframes and this scroll-driven animations API. For more about it, check out this site. Definitely take a picture if you want to learn more, because there's demos, there's code, there's lots of stuff to check out and learn more about the scroll-driven animations API. Again, I think this is an awesome progressive enhancement for your users. And on top of that, it's not just about user experience. It also can significantly improve performance when you're animating properties that don't hog the GPU. And here's an example of someone testing this on our team. Yuriko tested this by animating things like transforms and opacities versus doing this in the way that you would now with JavaScript. Scroll observers, you also have to worry about resize observers, element observers as they enter and exit the screen. And it really shows that using the native platform and using properties that can work without running on the main thread, like the transforms, like opacity, can improve performance significantly. So all the demos I showed pretty much just animated those things, and you can do a lot with it. So this is a great quote from one of the partners that we work with, from Tokopedia, who said they managed to reduce up to 80% of their lines of code when compared to using conventional JavaScript scroll events, and observed that the average CPU usage reduced from 50% to 2% while scrolling. So just another example of why it's important to follow along with stuff happening in web UI on the web platform. It's not just about user experience, it's also about significantly improving performance for your users. So with that, I also now want to talk about UI components. This is another really exciting space, and there's a lot that's changing in it. Who here has heard of the popover API? Okay, so a few more of you, then scroll-driven animations. And for good reason, because the popover API, which includes the popover attribute, is going stable as of this week. I think April 16th was technically the stable date for Firefox. I'm not sure if that got moved to a little bit later, but popover is now, or will be very, very, very soon, in all stable browsers. And this feature is a powerhouse. So we can now have ads like this and popovers all over the platform. No, I'm kidding. Popover is used everywhere. Menus, pickers, dialogues is a type of popover. That's another element that you might want to use for this kind of experience. And it's super, super valuable for all that the browser provides. So in terms of what the browser actually provides, it provides promotion to the top layer, which is a separate layer that sits above the rest of the page. So you don't have to worry about fighting with z-index anymore. You don't even need to use React portals anymore, because you can use popover or dialog to break out of the component that you're in and have something live above the rest of the page. So this saves like a whole bunch of work for you there. It also has optional light dismiss functionality, which means that if you click away from the popover, you can close the popover and then return focus to the rest of the page. You don't have to build that state in. There's also default focus management, so that when you tab into the popover, regardless of where the popover is on the page, it could be at the bottom of the DOM, the next tab stop will be within the popover. So that accessibility semantic of shifting the tab focus is already built in. You don't have to build that yourself. And then there's also keyboard accessibility that's built in. Hitting the escape key or double toggling the popover will close the popover and return focus. Another state that you don't have to manage and build yourself for this user experience. And finally, it has semantic component bindings, which connect a popover to its trigger. So yes, all of this is done with just one HTML attribute, believe it or not. Have any of you tried to build a popover? I'm sure many of you have. Yeah, raise your hand. How hard was it to do all this? I see a lot of nodding. The way that you do it with popover is this. All you have to do is add the attribute. So this is the thing that's popping over. Give it an ID, and then hook up that ID to a button that is opening the popover with popover target. That's it. All of those things. It feels like magic, because it really is just such an important missing feature. So you can do things like this, where I'm clicking and then clicking out. I could tab and then spacebar this open and then double toggle. I could tab, hit escape. You can do all those things. Another feature of popover is the ability to create manual popovers. So in this case, if I open this popover and I click outside of it, you don't get the light dismiss. You can actually create a custom button, like I am doing here, with popover target action to hide it, and then you connect that to the popover target, again using the same ID. So you really have a lot of customizable control with popover. It's a really powerful API. And you might already be using popovers without realizing it, because GitHub has popovers on their website. On the home page, the new menu uses popovers. The PR review menu also is a popover. So they're already shipping this in production using the Oddbird polyfill, which you can install here and import like this, in production, while leveraging the power of the web platform to reduce a lot of the code. We talked to the GitHub team, and they're actually really involved in this API because it's been so, so valuable to them, and it's really cool to see it already in production with that team. So animating popovers is a feature that is a bit of a work in progress across browsers. It is available in Chromium for now, but again, if you're using popover, animating them in and out can be a nice progressive enhancement, where that would look like this, where you're animating up and out instead of just popping up and then exiting. So the way that we do that is with a few different APIs. The first is this starting style keyword, so this feature where we would have to teach the browser how to animate this style, because when you have the popover outside of the DOM, it doesn't exist yet. So we have to tell the browser what the styles are before it appears. So here we're starting below that translate Y of 20 pixels and going up to 0, where the open state is on popover open. So all of this is when you're opening the popover, you set your starting style, the pre-styles, then you set your actual open state, so translate Y of 0 and then opacity 1, and then the exit state is the resting state of the popover on the element itself, and here we're translating it up to kind of go away. And then the final new feature is this allow discrete keyword, which lets us tell the browser that we want things like display and other properties, discrete animations, to animate on a timeline. So instead of flipping on at the first keyframe, we can animate them on a timeline, which means that we can now animate display, and that is a precursor to popover animating. So anchor positioning is more of an experimental API, but it is landing very, very soon in Chromium, and so I'm very excited about this, because I think this one has some of the biggest implications to reducing a lot of code cruft and making our lives easier. It's landing in 1 month in Chromium stable. It's currently in Canary if you want to check it out, and I have been deep in this feature, so I'm super excited for it to land. So I just showed you a few popovers. In this case, anchoring a popover would mean that we can actually connect it to its button, but it doesn't have to be a popover that you apply anchor to. So here's an example of what we would do there. You can set this anchor name on the button, and then you can set a position anchor on the popover, and then use that anchor to actually absolutely position the anchor to that button element. So here, we're positioning the bottom of the popover, or the anchored element, to the top of the anchor, or the button, and then we're also giving it some space. So we're adding 1 rem here. And then the right is going to be positioned to the right. You can also do things like this, where you give it an explicit anchor name. So here we have this menu. It's great for menus, submenus. And then in the anchor function, use the anchor name just directly. So here we're saying that we want the left to be at the menu's left, and the top of this menu to be at the bottom of that anchor. And you can grow and build on this. So here we have a menu, we have a submenu, and this is where it gets really exciting, because we can actually tell the browser what we want to happen when there's not enough space for this menu to be on the screen. All of this can be done declaratively in CSS. So what we can do here is set this position try block. So we have this position try bottom, where we're saying, okay, if this initial set of position, left and top being right next to the menu, if this doesn't work, if there's not enough space in the viewport here, then try this position try bottom. And here we're switching that so that it appears below the menu. So with just a few lines of code here, we have all of this functionality. We don't have to do resize observers. We don't have to do any of that in order to build this into the browser, which is cool. Who thinks that's cool? There's more cool stuff. So another feature is called position try order, where you can actually tell the browser how you want it to order the list of those fallbacks. So you can have a full list of fallbacks, where I just had 1 in that example, but you could have more. And you can position to multiple anchors. So here we're using 2 different anchors to set the top and left position versus the bottom right position. I've given them names, 1 and 2, and then here I have top left calling the first one, and the bottom right calling the second one. So you can create little diagrams and other cool things in CSS by leveraging multiple anchors and the anchor positioning API. Another cool feature of this API is called inset area, and this is a new positioning algorithm for anchoring specifically. Only works with anchor positioning right now, but it lets you more declaratively say where you want things to be placed. So I made a tool to kind of help understand how this all works, but instead of having to do top anchor bottom, you can now say inset area top, or inset area left, or inset area bottom, and it very clearly positions your anchor in that space. If you want it to span multiple blocks, this sort of works like a 9-column grid. You would use the span dash prefix for start at the bottom and then span to the left, or start at the bottom and span to the right. And there's a logical property equivalent if you're building a website that works across languages. You can do start at the block end and then span to the inline end. So same thing will work with any of these features. If you want to just copy and paste the code while you're using this. Anchortool.com, this is the first of many pieces of teaching Anchor that I will put on the site, but it was really fun to experiment with this inset area. I love it. So here we can rewrite this to be a lot more clear. Inset area, top, span left, and it's done for you. To build on top of the coolness, there's also these new keywords like flip inline, flip block, and flip block, flip inline. So you don't even have to write the fallback try positions. You can let the browser automatically determine them for you. So in this case, we've created this popover, which again does not have to be a popover, it could be any element, and we have it positioned the bottom of it to the top of the button. And then what we're doing is position try options flip block. So here, as this is resizing, we don't even have to write what the fallback is. The browser knows to flip it in the block direction. And you could write this even shorter. I wanted to show justify self because there's also a new anchor center property for justification. But you don't need this if you use inset area, inset area top, inset area bottom. 2 lines of code, you can get all of this functionality with Anchor. No third-party dependencies, no additional scripting, no resize observers, scroll observers, or any of that. It's pretty cool. Thanks for whoever clapped over there. With that, we see this all the time. We see this all over the web platform. I've built this before, and it sucks to build. So making this a part of the native platform, I think, will make a lot of people's lives easier, including myself. So when you combine these features, you could do popover with anchor positioning and CSS trigonometric functions and make really cool menus like this where we can combine trigonometry in CSS and use translations and calc to position things on a grid. And this is where I think that people don't realize CSS is so complex. It is a programming language that gives you a lot of functionality and features. And it helps you create things like this with no JavaScript, building this with CSS so that it anchors to its parent, so that it works across all platforms and all frameworks, as long as the browser support is there, and it's getting there pretty quickly. So it's pretty cool. One thing to note about popover is that there is no default semantic role. So while it does provide some of those accessibility constraints, like the tabbing and other connections, you would still need to give it some semantics. So you can give it the menu role if it's a menu, or a tooltip if it's a tooltip, or if it's a dialogue and you want to inert the rest of the page and have the user focus on that dialogue interaction, then you wouldn't use popover, you'd use the dialogue element, which is also getting a bunch of updates to work more declaratively. And if it's a selection, then you'd use the select element, which is also something that's getting a lot of cool updates. So next for popovers and dialogues is this concept called invoke target, which lets you declaratively use invokers in HTML to trigger open those things, like the popover open, not popover open, the popover target would also work with an invoke target for things like dialogue. You could also use that for popover once that's landed. It's currently also in all browsers in the TP or the Canary versions or nightly. And then interest target, which is like what we see on Wikipedia, where you want to hover over or show focus on a link to then pop over that tooltip, like a hover card, but also let that work on links and other things. This is a really, really tricky accessibility pattern to figure out, and we want to make this easier as a browser. So a lot of other cool stuff coming for anchoring, like one is the ability to style that little arrow called a tether, also to slide things in and shift things in the viewport instead of just swapping it to the next area. So this will be coming in the next level of anchoring. And I said I would time check. I think I have a tiny bit of time to talk about select. So I do want to talk about this. It is future stuff coming to the browser, but it is currently in Canary if you wanted to play with it. All the demos that I'm going to show are in Canary if you wanted to start exploring them. But yes, this means that stylable, accessible dropdowns are next to the browser. And I built a bunch of demos. Here's one from GitHub. What I think is interesting here is when I click on the first option, create a merge commit, you can make it look different. It can say merge pull request instead of create merge commit. This is just HTML and CSS. I'll show you how in a second. You can also do things like this, where the Airbnb select is really cool, and it is also responsive. You currently can't do any of this with a select, but you can really get customized with the customizable select, the next version of select that's coming to the browser. You could do things as simple as just styling a background or a checkbox, or this Gmail select where it shows just the icon when you click on it, or selecting flags in a country select that is just I wrote a tweet in 2017 that was like, it's 2017, why can we still not style selects? I'm like, it's 2014, why can we still not style selects? And the code behind the scenes looks like this, where we have a button. The selected option is a new element that mimics the HTML from inside the options. Data list is another element that exists now, but not for select. It doesn't render right now. But if you wrap your options in a data list, you could then apply this arbitrary content, like these images. And another benefit of reusing select for this is that in unsupported browsers, the browser will just ignore those lines of code, so you get a fallback that works like a normal select. So you can progressively enhance with this and get that enhanced user experience while providing your users a semantic select dropdown for them to use and access. So I think that's cool. I'm going to quickly wrap this. I get a lot of questions about my slides sometimes. So one other thing is that my deck is actually built with no JavaScript whatsoever. And this was like a fun challenge that I tried myself last year, and I just really liked this deck, so I kept going with it. But this is just vanilla CSS and HTML. I put some iframes in there, but you don't really have to. And the way that this is built is with these style blocks, so you can make style blocks content editable. So here I could change the background of my body, so I could do like background, I don't know, pink, or hot pink, or I could do like a gradient. But this is all dynamic code, no JavaScript. Look, come on, no JavaScript. I'm doing some scroll snap stuff. There's a lot of cool scroll stuff in the browser too, just using arrow keys, scrolling through. And I'm using access key to navigate this presentation. So I could just do, Control Option 1, go to the start, Control Option 2, go to the different places in my presentation. We could do like a choose your own adventure next time. I think that would be fun, because there's so much to talk about. But one thing that I want to leave you all with, other than a love for CSS and HTML, is that CSS and HTML work in every framework. So if at your company you're not only using React, if you're working with a larger code base or you're trying to integrate, this is something you don't have to worry about creating one type of component for. It'll work in every framework. There's no dependencies. The browser is the dependency. Your users are already using a browser. So good on you, no additional dependencies. Which is why I think it's so important to follow along with these things, leverage the power of the browser, reduce complexity to improve your velocity, and stay in the know. So this is how you can follow along. Web.dev and developer.chrome.com are two places that our team writes about what is new in the browser. Web.dev for things that have gone stable, and developer.chrome.com for things that are more experimental, like Anchor and Select. But there's a ton happening in this space. Thank you again for making it after lunch. It's so exciting to be here, and I appreciate your time.